So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to talk about is what exactly HSTouch is. There's been some confusion over the past year or so. Ever since we announced it, some people thought it was an actual touchscreen unit, like a hardware piece. Other people thought it was a combination of software and hardware. HSTouch, in a nutshell, is a graphical user interface system for HomeSeer automation controllers and software. And it's made up of three different things. There is a designer program, which runs on a conventional Windows computer. There is a runtime client, or actually a couple of different clients that are designed to run on both Windows and Windows CE or Windows mobile devices. And these can be touchscreen devices, or they can be cell phones, or they can be just regular computers. When we first set about to develop HSTouch, our initial vision was that it was going to be running on touchscreens, but as we got further into the project, we realized that having a nice graphical interface just for a standard PC was a pretty good idea. So we've made some changes to the program to accommodate that. So it's a designer, it's the runtime, and then it's also a plugin. The plugin is going to be installed on your HomeSeer system, and the plugin is what is going to be used to communicate both to the designer when you're creating the screens and also to the client when you're actually using them. Projects will be created with the designer, and then they're going to be actually deployed over to the clients for use. And we've built a very nice remote deployment function into the designer to streamline that process and make it a lot easier. Okay, so that's what HSTouch is. The basic configuration is very much like what you see in the slide here. You've got your designer PC over on one side, you've got your HomeSeer system, and you've got your client devices on the other side. Now, even though we've split this into three different areas here, obviously, if you're running HomeSeer on a regular PC to begin with, and you want to use that as both the designer and the client, that's perfectly fine. So it doesn't necessarily have to be three pieces like what you're seeing here. I'm going to talk a little bit about features for HSTouch, which I think make it unique. There are touchscreen programs already out there that work with HomeSeer, and you guys already know what they are, I'm assuming. What we're trying to do is combine the best attributes of all of those programs out there and make it a very simple, very easy to use, very easy to work with tool. So the first thing we wanted to make sure was it was fully customizable, and it is. You can create your own backgrounds, buttons, sliders, put your own themes together. If you know anything at all about image editing, if you've got Photoshop, if you've got PaintShop Pro, if you've got even GIMP, any of those editors, you can create your own graphics and make the screens look exactly what you like them to be. It's also very tightly integrated to HomeSeer, and we'll see that when we go into the environment. I'll show you how to add a few buttons and do some things. But it's very, very tightly integrated. In fact, so tightly integrated with HomeSeer that you really can't even run the designer unless you have your HomeSeer system up and running at that point, because it's going to connect to it, and it's going to import or draw in all the devices, all the events, everything from your HomeSeer system. It is IP enabled, and we saw that in the previous slide. It connects to the designer and to the plugin and to the client. Everything is connected through IP. And that allows us to, you can actually run the designer from anywhere in the world and connect back to your HomeSeer system. Likewise, you can run a client from anywhere in the world and connect back to your HomeSeer system. So that opens up a lot of nice possibilities. It does have a remote deployment, a design and deployment feature in it. So, and this is going to be, I think this is going to be particularly important if you have a vacation home, secondary residence, or if you're a HomeSeer dealer and you've got clients or customers who want some changes done to their touchscreens. You'll be able to make those changes remotely and actually deploy them without having to roll a truck out or roll a car out to the site. The program is designed to support Windows, also Windows CE and Windows mobile clients. Rich told me a little earlier today he's working on Linux support as well. So looks like the client, hopefully we can get that going for Linux type devices as well in the not too distant future. And the iPhone. Okay, good. It does support RSS data feeds, so and we'll look at that a little bit also in the presentation, as well as netcam video. And you've got a really interesting feature in there that allows you to create custom groups, where, for example, you could create a group that included an image graphic and a status bit of text and a slider, and you could tie all three of those elements to, let's say, a lamp module. And you can save that group as a lamp module group. Now, anytime you go to your device list inside of HSTouch and you drag one of your devices to the screen, if it happens to be a lamp module, it's going to come in as a group like that, and it's already going to be pre-configured and ready to go. Okay, so those are some of the features in the program. I want to talk about installation a little bit. We're going to be using an integrated or unified installer, which has got all three pieces on it. You want to install the designer on your Windows PC. Again, that can be your HomeSeer system too. You're going to install the plugin on your HomeSeer PC, or if you happen to be a HomeTroller or a Pro 100 user, you're going to install it on that. And then you want to enable the plugin like you enable any other plugin that you put in. For you guys who've been using the program for quite a while, this is pretty straightforward. As far as putting it on your client, how you install it on the client is going to largely depend on what kind of client you're using. If you're using a regular Windows PC, then you run the installer on that and install it as usual. If you're using a Windows CE or a Windows mobile device, you're not going to be able to run the installer, but what you will be able to do is grab the client application file and simply copy that over to your mobile device, at least the first time. Each subsequent time that you update the client, you'll be able to update it from the designer directly. As far as setting up the designer and the client to connect with your HomeSeer system, from within the designer, there'll be a tools menu. You want to go to that and then choose connection defaults. If you're on a LAN network, you simply want to put in your LAN IP address and then your regular HomeSeer username and password. That's going to be required to connect to the system. If you're connecting to your HomeSeer system externally, as I do quite a bit here, you're going to want to use your HomeSeer name, your My HomeSeer Connect name, or if you're using some other DDNS service, you can use that name. Or if you happen to have a static IP for your home, you can put that in there too. The port 102.102.0.0 is required and is used by default by HomeSeer. So in order to make HSTouch connect properly, you got to make sure you're forwarding that port. You do that in your router. Okay, I'm going to talk here just a little bit about the designer interface. This is what it looks like when you first open up the program. And we're going to get into this in a bit more detail than that, but I want to just point out the basic building blocks of the designer. There's a design area itself in the dead center. That's where your screens are going to appear, and that's where you're going to be putting all your elements. There's an elements palette over on the left-hand side, and this is where the backgrounds, the buttons, the sliders, and all the other elements are stored. Then there's a devices palette in the lower left-hand corner. This is going to bring in all of your HomeSeer devices, and you'll literally be able to drag and drop a device from this palette to your design screen. And then over on the right here, we've got the properties pane. Whatever you select in the design area, you'll be able to adjust the properties for it directly over in this pane over here. If anybody's used to Visual Studio, you probably are familiar with this environment already, as we're using a lot of the same metaphor here in this design. I want to talk just a little bit about working with graphics. I mentioned earlier you can use Photoshop, Paint Shop Pro, really any image editor would be fine. You create your own custom graphics for backgrounds, buttons, sliders, and other images. The designer and the client support the standard popular image formats: JPEGs, bitmaps, GIF files, PNG files, and we do support transparency too for GIF and PNG files. The naming conventions are mentioned in the help file. Naming conventions are essentially what you have to name buttons or what you have to name sliders in order for them to appear properly in the elements palette. Like I say, the help file goes into some detail about that, so be sure to check that out when you try out the program. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open up the HSTouch program, the designer itself, and we'll jump right over there. All right, well, what I want to do, again, is just go through a few basics over here. I'm not going to get too fancy, but a few things about how the designer operates so you guys get a feel for when you first load up the beta and start to go with it, what exactly to do. We talked about the connection defaults. That happens off the Tools menu over here. Go into Options, go into Connection Defaults, and that's where you'd be setting the program up. There are also project defaults that you can set up to, so every time you create a new project that has certain, let's say, size, dimensions to it, and a background image, and that sort of thing. I'm not going to go through all this stuff here. This really isn't a training session today, but at least I want to show you where some of the important stuff is. So try those options. I do have a project already created here, so I'm going to bounce around in it. It's got a lot of these elements already created, but like I said, just want to give you a quick feel for how to do things. The elements palette over here is resizable. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you've got buttons are all stored in the same block here. Notice there's a specific skin that's listed here. This is the default skin. Our vision with that is you can create a theme, and then you can put all your buttons, all your sliders, all your other elements, and associate them to a specific theme. So if you want to change themes quickly, you'll do that from the top menu here, and then all of your elements will change. But buttons are here, sliders are here. There's a number of what we refer to as other elements, including text, buttons, images, groups, stuff like that. If you create custom groups, they're going to show up in a different tab here. If you have custom graphics you want to work with, they'll be on a different tab. And then for various backgrounds, this is going to depend on the device that you want to deploy on. I'm using an 800 by 400 sized device in my house right now, and so I've got backgrounds set up over here. But everything is drag and drop. If I want to change the background of a particular screen, like this screen here, for example, which I've set up as a kind of a demo main menu, all I've got to do is just drag whatever element I want to the screen, and automatically it'll be picked up by the screen, and I can pick up the elements that are on it and move them around as well. Okay, so that operation is pretty straightforward. One of the first things you're going to probably want to do is control a device with a button. And for that, I think I'm going to flip over. I have a test screen over here where I put some stuff. But controlling a lamp or any other device, what you want to do is first of all choose how you want to do it. In this case, if I want to control a lamp with a button, I'll just grab a button, move it over to my screen. And at this point, if you look over on the right-hand side here, my properties over here are specific to this graphic. And if I change to a slider, or if I change the background of the screen, notice how the properties are always changing. Well, the first thing I might want to do is label this. There's a text property over here where I can call this, let's say, my hutch lamp, like so. And that changes the font on the screen. There are other attributes I can go into. I can change the font style and size. Pretty straightforward stuff, like so. So now I have that. Notice that the press state for the button is already predetermined. These are actually two different graphics, and by using a specific naming convention and saving them to my elements library, I get this effect when I press. If I want to use the same font for the foreground and the background, very easy to set that up. I just go to my font for my normal state. I can copy that just by double-clicking on it a couple of times, and then I can paste that over to the pressed font. So there we go, same font being used. All right, now, in order to control a device, what I have to do is associate this button with an action. And for that, I come up to the Actions portion of my Properties pane, And I want to choose not actions when pressed, but actions when released. The reason why I want to do released is that gives the button a chance for it to go into this pressed state. So when you're at a touch screen, you go over to it, you'll touch it, you'll actually see the pressed state first, and then when you release it, it's going to control the light. As soon as I click on the menu for actions when released, I get an action editor appearing up on the screen. Nothing in it right now. If I want to click add over here, it adds a brand new action, and then I can go into the action properties over here. Very first thing I want to do is select the action type. Now, there are a number of different action types I can select from here. And what I want to do is find in the middle here a HomeSeer action, which is to control a HomeSeer device. So I select that. That's the very first thing that I do. After I select that, another menu appears in the device row here, and this draws in all of the devices that I have in this installation. Okay, so I can look at the list and go, okay, there's my hutch lamp. Bingo. And then finally, I have to tell HSTouch what the command is. So when I touch that button, what's it going to do to my hutch lamp? Is it going to turn it on? Going to turn it off? Do I want to toggle on or off? Or do I want to go to a preset dim level? Well, in this case, I'm just going to turn it on and on. I'm going to go to the toggle. There we go. So that button is already configured now to turn that hutch lamp on. And when I deploy it and run it in the client, that's exactly what it's going to do. If I want to create some other buttons on the screen that have similar properties, let's say for other lamps, I can copy this button and I can paste it to my screen. All right, so now I have a duplicate button. All I really have to do at this point is change and say, no, this is the floor lamp, like so. And if I go into the properties for it, I only really need to make one adjustment, and that is in the middle here, the device itself that it's going to control. I'm going to change that to the floor lamp. Okay, so that button's done. That's all set. Okay, and I can continue on for as long as I want. All right, so that's a simple button, or what we refer to actually as a graphic button. Sliders work in the same sort of fashion. I can drag a slider to the screen. This one over here. And if I want to associate that to, let's say the same thing, to the hutch lamp here, I'll select it first. And then over in the properties pane, there is this status tracking property. I want to go into that. My control association editor appears. I can say, yep, I want to associate that with a HomeSeer device. And again, I get the same list. So now I can go and say hutch lamp. Say OK to it, and there we go. So now that slider is going to be specifically controlling the hutch lamp, and I can go up or down, I can dim it, I can turn it fully on or turn it fully off. Now you might notice when I came into the screen, at first I already had some graphics on it. These four over here, I've got a picture of a lamp, I've got a button, I've got this text element that says off, and I have a slider. These elements over here can be combined in a group to control a particular light. Right now they're controlling a window lamp, for example. And in fact, we have status support for graphics built in, so as you raise and lower the slider, you'll be able to see that. Let me save this, and I'm gonna open up the client, the HSTouch client. We'll take a quick look at how it runs in operation. Okay. All right. So here's the screen I was just messing around with. This is the actual client now. Now I have it running without a title bar. And so it's the way the screen is configured is it's ideally suited for a touch screen where you don't want a title bar and you don't want Windows buttons and things like that. But if I were running this on a regular PC, I have an option where I can add a title bar to it. Now I'd be able to drag this client around. So you could run it on your regular HomeSeer PC just as another Windows application. On the test screen, over here. Hide my designer here if I can. Okay, so here's the screen that I just created. And notice I've got a slider here already associated to a window lamp. It obviously says that it's off, and the graphic also shows that it's off. If I were to click the window lamp button, it's going to turn the lamp on. You can see that the graphic changes, and also the slider changes as well, as does the text. Now I can drag down my slider. Notice that the dim level is changing as I'm dragging it down, and the image also changed too. And if I go to the very bottom, it shuts it down. Now if I want to combine some of these elements into one button, I can. For example, if I want to take this window lamp button out and instead use the lamp itself as a button, I can do that. That's fine. Now I'm touching the lamp itself to turn it on or off. The slider obviously is very useful for dim level. Okay. All right, so that's basic control. Get my designer back up again. Okay, now so we've associated a button with a device. Obviously, HomeSeer, you can also do events. So let's. Why don't we do that? Why don't we associate a button with an event? Let me clean my screen up here a little bit. I'll stay on the same screen. Okay. All right. So I'm going to grab another button, bring that into the screen, and we're going to call this all lights off. Okay. I'm not going to bother with the font. You guys know how to change the font now, so I'll leave that alone. And I am going to go back into the action editor again. But this time I'm going to select a different action option. Again, I want to run this when I release the button. But now for action type, I'm going to go in and say, okay, HomeSeer, trigger a HomeSeer event. And now notice I have access to all my HomeSeer events. So whatever's in the list here, I can pick that up and use it. Have event living. Oh, we'll use this one. Lighting events, living room lights off. I'll change my mind here because it's easy to find. So there we go. So I have an event now, which is turn all the lights off in the living room. There we go. That's it. I'm done. If I deploy this in the client, touch that button, it's going to turn off all the lights in the living room. So running an event is a very simple process. I do want to expand on this a little bit, though, because yes, you can create an event in HomeSeer. And yes, you can tie it to a button inside of HSTouch, but you can also create your own brand new event inside of HSTouch where it doesn't even exist in HomeSeer. And you can do that by combining actions. For example, let's go back into the action editor here. Notice I have a pretty empty list of actions over here, but I can add as many different actions as I want. So I'm already triggering an event with this button, but I can add another action and do another thing. So in addition to triggering that event, I can run another HomeSeer device. Okay. Let's say turn my basement router off. There we go. So now it's done. It's going to do two things. So you can actually build an event inside of HSTouch that doesn't even exist inside of HomeSeer. And you might find that useful in areas where it's an event you typically wouldn't normally create for general HomeSeer use, but it might be kind of handy to have that event for a grouping of items that you've got, let's say in the living room. You've got a touchscreen installed in the living room, you might want to create some scenes or events or that sort of thing. You can do it directly in HSTouch without even putting it in HomeSeer. Okay? Okay, so that's I think that covers pretty well controlling devices and running events. I want to flip over to RSS data. One of the features we put in HSTouch fairly recently is we gave it the ability to draw in data from RSS feeds. If you want to put a bit of RSS data up on the screen, whether it's a link to an image or just raw data itself, the first thing you want to do is go to this other tab of the Elements palette and find a text. In this case, it's going to be a text element. And what I'm going to do is I want to display the current temperature, let's say, current outside temperature in my area in this box. So what I want to do is come over here to my Properties pane and find the Status Device Associations property. And I'm going to click into that. And I'm not going to use this as a button, so I'm going to check this box up at the top that says Use the Same for normal and pressed. And inside of my Association Type menu, I want to choose RSS Data. And then I want to go into Edit. When I get into Edit, I can either put in the URL to an existing RSS feed, or if it's one of the common feeds, or one of the feeds we've supplied with HSTouch, I can just draw it in from this menu up top here. And in fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to Current Weather. Notice, I don't know if you can see it, but it's prompting me for a zip code. I'm going to type my zip code in, and now I can get data. When I get data, it's importing the RSS feed file, and now I can step through it until I get the field that I want. Temperature, yay! All right, so all I got to do at this point is click on the temperature and say OK to it, and I'll keep it as text, and it's going to draw the temperature into that box. So now I can position that where I want. If I want to add a label in front of it that says current temperature, that's fine. But that data now is going to be brought in automatically from the RSS feed. That's useful in a lot of applications. I created a weather page a short time ago, for example, that's based almost exclusively on that data. So if I go to the weather page, you get a kind of a sense for what that would look like. And here it is over here. Okay, so this is all RSS data. The days of the week, the image that it's drawing in is from an RSS feed, the conditions, high temp, low temp. All this is coming from in fact, this is two different data feeds. There's a 5-day forecast feed, and there's also a current weather feed that are populating this page. So if I want to know what the temperature is, I want to know what the forecast is for the day or the week, I just go to my touchscreen in the morning, take a quick look, and it's already there. Okay, so that's how we do RSS. I'm going to shift over to, I think, video at this point. I know there's been some interest in working with video. And for that, I'm going to go back to my test screen, clean it up again. I think what I want to do for a video feed is I want to draw in an image element. Right, Rich? And on the image element, what I want to do is associate that with a URL for the camera image. I have the same video feed already set up in another screen, so I'm just going to grab from it the URL. And I'm going to paste it back into that other screen. Is that image URL normal? Is that where I pulled it from? Mm-hmm. It's not sized correctly, but you get the idea. Everybody sees that, right? And so when you deploy this now, it's going to bring in the live data feed, the live video feed from that particular camera. Yeah. And that's how you do it. Okay, so we've gone over adding a device, controlling a device. How about just a direct device itself without adding a button? Let's do that. Clean my screen up a little bit. The quickest, simplest, easiest way to control a device, to add a device to your screen inside the designer, is to go to the Devices palette. This bad boy down here. And this is literally pulling in all the information from your HomeSeer system. So I could say, for example, let me just limit this to the lib Yep. So for my devices palette down here, what I've done is I've just limited the view to the living room, and I'm going to go back to my test screen here. If I want to control the picture window lamp, all I got to do is just drag the device over here. Looks like I've got some templates already created. Alright, so what that did, I should explain this here. Under normal circumstances, if I don't define or associate a device type to a control group, which is what you're seeing here, if I don't do that, I just get a button. And I may have that over here for floor. Yeah. So normally when I drag a device in here, it just shows up as a little simple button. No graphics, nothing. It's just got the name of the device. However, if you go into the actions for this device, you'll see it is already pre-configured for control of that device. So that is, like I said, literally the quickest, simplest, easy way to control something is just grab it over here, drag it to your screen, and you can control it right away. You just deploy that in the client, you'll be able to control that device right now without any further pre-configuring. Now, of course, everybody remembers the window lamp over here. I mentioned one of the things we can do early on in the features list is you can create a control group that's specific to a bunch of elements, and then you can define that control group or you can associate it to a specific device type. Now in this case, if I wanted to create a control group, and I haven't done this yet, but if I wanted to create a control group out of this, all I've got to do is go back to my elements palette, drag in a group box, and I want to position the group box around these elements. You can't see some of it. You lose the image here, sorry. But I'm going to make this a transparent background now. There we go. Over here, I go to the device type property, and I can say this is a Z-Wave dimming device. Now if I save it as a custom template, I can say dimming device, like so. Okay, so that saves that now as a specific control group that's associated by default with a Z-Wave dimmable device. So if I go back in my list now, and I go to another room, let's go to the kid's bedroom here, and I drag this light, I know this happens to be a Z-Wave dimming device, I drag it to the screen, it gives me these different options to select from. The one I just created, you can see it in all uppercase letters here as dimming device. If I select that, I now have that. Clear this out. Clear my screen to make it a little easier. There's my control group, and that will specifically control now the kid's bedroom light. Okay? So once you define a control group, you can associate it with a device type, and then anything you drag to your screen that's specific to that device type will appear the same way on the screen. Again, this is a further way to quickly do very fast development of a screen for devices that you want to all appear the same, and you want them to behave or function in the same manner. Okay. Is everybody pretty clear on this aspect? And is this a good time to move over and talk about music control? I'm going to assume that's a yes. I'm going to go back to my test screen here, and I'm not going to go over every aspect of creating a music screen because that would take an hour by itself, but I want to show you a little bit about how to work with music elements. Now it's essential if you're going to do music selection with HomeSeer that you're using one of our music API plugins. So you've got to be using the iTunes plugin or the Media Player plugin. I think the JRiver plugin falls into that category too. But you've got to have the plugin enabled. If you have the plugin enabled, then elements from the Music API will become visible inside of HSTouch. Now, one of the very basic things that most people want to do is browse through a listing of albums, a listing of artists, a listing of songs. And for that, the way you want to set that up in HSTouch is to start with a list box. So the list box is on the Others tab here of the Elements palette, and it's just simply this guy right here. There's our list box. This can be configured like any other button. I can change the fonts, I can change the background color. All of those elements can be changed like any other element inside of HSTouch. But I want to associate this with, I want to make this my main music selector. And so the first thing I want to do, so over here where it says status tracking, I want to go into my device editor and select the music option. And these are the elements that are being drawn in from iTunes. Okay, so I want to find on the list the iTunes Music Selector and say OK to that. All right, so I've just associated that list. That's okay. What I did was I took this list box here and I associated it to the Music Selector. That's all I did. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is I still have to be able to tell the box which iTunes attribute to list. Do I want to list albums? Do I want to list artists? Do I want to list genres? What do I want to list? So for that, I'm going to add a button. And I'm just going to call this button Artists. Like so. What I want to do with Artists is I want to add an action to this button. And in that action, I go down to my music area, and I want to set the music selector display. Make sure I choose the right system. I only have iTunes installed, so I'm selecting that. It is the test screen list box is what I want to change, and I want to display artists. Okay, so that's done. When I click that button now, it's going to display our artists. Let's say I want to display albums too. I'm going to copy this button, paste it right next to it. I'm going to call this albums. Again, I don't have to change much except the very last part of this action where it is selecting albums. Okay, so I got artists and albums. If I save this and deploy it, I'll be able to see what it looks like. So I got artists, now I got albums. Okay. Sure? Yeah? Yeah, that's pretty easy. Let me go back to the designer. And being very simple about this, obviously, you're going to want more buttons for your music control, but this is a quick way to select what you want to display in the music selector box itself. What was that question again? It was house plan, right? Well, I have a very simplistic stick figure house plan here in one of these screens. And all you need to do really is, if you got a nice house plan already drawn up in Photoshop or something, go ahead and bring it in as a background image. And then you can place on top of it the elements for status. I put an image element over here, and then I set it to associate to a hutch lamp at home. and then for the status image editor, I just simply created a couple of different image options. The first image option here is a graphic that's tied to this image element for any time that lamp is on, and then I have another graphic that's tied for any time the lamp is off. Okay. So that's the sort of thing you do here. Obviously, if you got a floor plan up on your screen, you want to manage your real estate maybe a little better than I'm doing it here with this amazingly huge lamp. But you could have a little tiny, almost like a glowing little bulb on the screen if you want to, just to signify the status of a light in a particular area of the house. But I hope that answers the question. Jumping back, Rich, does it make any sense to do anything else with the music selector at this point, or any other elements there? I'm just, we're almost an hour and 20 minutes into the session here, and I don't want to tie everybody up. Are there any other elements, any other burning questions that you're getting here that we should be jumping into and addressing before we tie it off? Okay, so great. So if I think that covers it. Good deal. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's taking the time, like I said, out of a busy work week. Thanks for taking the time. If you do have any questions, go ahead and get a hold of Rich or get a hold of me, and we'll do the best we can with them.